New neighbor thinks my flags are an eyesore, posted by Michigan Kerr, and this OP is not even in the HOA. Check this out. Background. About 4 years ago, my township placed a new ordinance which forbids new freestanding flagpoles. This was to curb obnoxious political flag wars. It didn't work, as most involved in such things already had flagpoles, sometimes multiple, or if they just mounted them to their trucks. I had a flagpole which, about 3 years ago while I was on vacation, was presumably knocked over by a drunk driver. They were never caught. I thought since my original pole was grandfathered in, confirmed at an onset of ordinance, a new pole wouldn't be a problem. I was quickly sent a warning and lost my appeal, having to remove the new pole. This saddened me, so I went looking through town ordinances and, lo and behold, there's no limit to how many single flags can be mounted on your buildings via poles. Hurrah! I now have 3 flagpoles on my garage. From left to right, we got an American flag, a POWMIA remembrance flag, and the third flag gets rotated per what I find humorous or speaks to me, usually non-political unless it's my "you're both idiots" flag. Currently, it's a Jolly Roger. Yeah, I'm a pirate, 200 years too late. This setup is specific. The American flag is the largest, and I don't want it smacking the house. And with the way the house is set up, no matter if you come from the left or the right, you'll first see that American flag and then the POW flag, followed by my last one. All 3 flags I have just replaced as of the first week of April. Now, I've had my share of headbutting with the HOA down the street. I'm not part of them. Sometime in the past few years, they have decided that houses in the HOA are only allowed 1 American flag and 1 military flag on the condition that you served in that branch. Not my circus. They can dictate that if they want to. Oddly enough, I have talked to the current head of the HOA, and the HOA has no issue with my flags. The color I painted my shed, however, that's another story. And now, on to the story. Loose dogs. I woke up this weekend to find 2 strange dogs playing in my yard. They quickly decide I'm a friend, and they follow my commands once they realize that I have treats. Awesome sauce. I secure the dogs, making one a quick collar because I live on a busy street and it's obvious they're someone's pets. Before I get the chance to try to call the number on one of the dog's tags, 2 older teenage girls run up looking for them. They don't have leashes on, shaking my head, so I loan them a couple of old leashes and find out that they've recently moved into the HOA. They promise to return my leashes and makeshift collar later that day. Yeah, no big deal. Worst case, I'm out something that, well, I really wasn't using anyways, and I've done my good deed for the day. A little bit later, I'm working in my garage tending to some seedlings I'm trying to get to grow, and I hear voices outside. So there's me, girl 1 and 2, and ornery man. Girl 1 says, "It was definitely this house. I remember the flags." I hit the remote to fully open the door. The ornery man says, "Well, I can't quite tell what he says, but I hear flags a few times and..." "He's nice, Grandpa," the second girl says. I go, "Hey, welcome back." "Sorry again they got loose. Thank you for your help." And they hand me back my leashes. Hey, no, look, no worries. It happens. I'm sure they'll get used to the area soon. But yeah, do try to keep an eye on them. There are predators around. "We'll try, thank you." "What's with these flags here?" He looks at the pirate flag. "We're not at sea." "Well, we used to have a flagpole, but it got knocked down. I thought the house looked odd with only 2, so I put up a 3rd for balance and whimsy." "Well, the HOA only allows 2 at maximum." Well, I didn't know they had that limit. I actually did know, I just don't care." "Well, you should." "I'm actually not part of the HOA, so if they want 2 maximum, it really doesn't affect me." "Well, you should follow their rules. It'll make for a better neighborhood." And at this point, the girls try to get him to change subject or just leave. Hey, I've had plenty of issues with them trying to push their rules on me. I'd rather they just stay over there with their list of rules. The girls look anxious and say goodbye, trying to convince Grandpa to go with them, but he stays behind. "Oh, but they bring up your property values. You should want to bring up theirs." He looks around. "Well, for example, by painting your house." I hold up my dominant hand, currently wrapped and recovering from surgery. "Yeah, it's too cold right now to paint, and I'm recovering from surgery, but I'll get it done this summer." "Well, at least you'll take down the flags when you paint. They're an eyesore." "Hey, I like them, and as soon as the paint's dry, they'll go right back up." but you should comply with the HOA rules. I purposely did not buy a house in an HOA, and that HOA has given me enough headaches over the years. If the HOA wants them down, they can try to take me to court again. See, just one more reason you should do what the HOA rulebook says. You won't lose in court. I'm laughing and I say, okay, I've had enough of this conversation. Please have a good rest of your day. I hit the remote to close the door. The old man pounds on the garage door and I threaten to call the police. After a few, I hear him muttering some words, stupid, flags, and why, along with some odd noises. I go out the front door to see him literally hanging by my American flag. What in the heck are you doing? Well, I'm taking down these eyesores. Get the heck off of my property now. At this point, he loses his grip on the flag, causing him to land on my cement driveway. Well, I'm going to sue you. I could have gotten hurt. Look, I would have helped you up, but since you've mentioned suing me, that won't be happening. He takes another yank on the flag and ends up falling into the grass this time. Give me your insurance information or I'll sue you. Look, idiot, that flag and that pole, they ain't going anywhere. As for my insurance and suing me, go ahead, go ask your beloved HOA how that ended for them. A car pulls up with another man and the girls. Hey, look, your ride's here. Get the heck off my property, man. Some man says, hey, don't talk to my dad like that. Well, he doesn't seem to respond to polite request, I replied. Oh my gosh, he's bleeding. Yeah, and I would have helped him up if he didn't threaten to sue me. He what? Yeah, he tried to tear down my flags, fell off of the flag, and threatened to sue me. The man turns out red. Whoa, well, you probably pushed him. I never touched him, and I pointed at the camera. It's all been recorded if you want to see it for yourself. The man turns to his dad and says, what the heck are you getting into us now? Just get in the car, Dad. The old ornery man takes another try this time at the POWMIA flag, and I catch him before he runs headlong into my house. Seriously, dude? Get your hands off of me. This is assault. I was going to try to be sure he was steady, but he decides to try and fight me, so I just let go. He ends up falling over onto my work truck's bumper. I'm going to sue you and your company for this. I just laugh at this. The man picks up his dad and shoves him into the car. As they drive away, the old ornery man rolls down his window and shouts, your flags are an eyesore. Later that day, the doorbell rings. It's the girls with their dogs. I brace for everything and anything, not knowing what was going to be said. I give my dog a futile settle command, futile due to 2 dogs in her yard, before stepping outside. Turns out, Grandpa was supposed to give me some money for saving their dogs. They aren't really sure what's up with his issue with the flags, but they admit that they think he may be having some dementia issues. I do ask if he's okay. They said, he's fine and only received some minor scrapes and bruises. And honestly, I'm glad he's only got minor injuries. They insist I take the money and I finally negotiate to only taking half. I joke that if they say that I took it all and it ever gets brought up, I'd play dumb, which they laugh and they agree to. As they get ready to leave, they tell me that they like my flags, especially the pirate one. This story stands up to the HOA and terrible Karen neighbors. I, 25 male, own a lakeside property that was legally and officially given to me by my parents. I've been living here for 6 years, and I have some great neighbors, along with some not so great ones. Of all my neighbors, I've only ever had problems with one who lives right next door named Mariette. She first moved in early this summer as she had the former house on her property demolished and rebuilt. My problems started with her over her use of my wood stove and fireplaces. With the temperatures getting colder, I've started to use them daily. My house is not equipped with any form of heating outside of the wood stove and a fireplace. This means that, from fall until spring, I will constantly have them going to keep my place warm. My family never outfitted the home with anything better because it was for weekend trips and we would winterize and leave it when things got cold. My parents thought of adding oil heating when I moved in, however, I opposed it because it was a waste of money and I didn't mind splitting logs. 5 days ago, after having received my shipment of logs for the fall, I was approached by my neighbor Mariette. She came around asking for my parents, to which I said that they don't live here and that I am the homeowner. She didn't believe me and said that I was too young to be a homeowner before leaving. Later that day, I heard a knock at my door and thought it was my girlfriend, so I gave my usual greeting of, "Hey sweet cheeks," while opening the door. Unfortunately, it was not her, and it was Mariette again, so I apologized quickly, and then I asked what she wanted. Once again, she wanted to speak with my parents, to which, in a more stern tone, I said that I was the homeowner. This time, she finally got it and said that I am violating HOA policy by using wood-burning fireplaces indoors and outdoors. In response, I said that as new as the house looks, I am not a member of the group, and that the town permits fireplaces and burning yard waste. She then went on to ask why I even needed them because they do nothing but harm the environment. I went on to explain that, while the house exterior looks new, the house actually has been around since 1930 and still uses a wood stove and a fireplace heating. She didn't believe me yet again and said that she would be back with an inspector. Yesterday, once again, she came with another person who introduced themselves as an HOA inspector. They tried to talk about my fireplaces, but I shut them down immediately and said that I am not a member of their group. The guy then tried to lie by saying that the HOA is in control of all the properties in the area. I immediately called him out on the lie, and I said that he is either lazy or a moron for not knowing that I am not with them. We went back and forth one more time before I told them that I will not listen to them and just to stuff it and leave. Do you agree with this comment? You're not the butt OP. If this continues, inform the HOA that if they continue to harass you, you have no issues looking into legal counsel. Also, let your neighbor know that she is not allowed on your property, and if she comes over, she is trespassing. Yeah, OP, go get a lawyer that will stand up for you because they sure don't have ground to stand on, it sounds like. What would you do? Am I the butthole for calling the HOA on the neighbors for installing a 25-foot tall bouncy castle and water slide in their backyard? I never thought I would be in this position, but I'm the one who sought out the 75-year-old members of the HOA board for assistance. Having said that, I feel like I was very patient and accommodating, but I just got pushed too far. But still, anytime you call the HOA, you may be the butthole. So my neighbors started out in February and March with a bouncy castle in their yard. I could not see it, but I could certainly hear it when the kids would start bouncing by 4:30 and 5 a.m. It honestly seemed that the kids would wake up really early and the parents would just send them outside so that they could sleep more. But it was incredibly loud. I had a polite conversation with the parents and they assured me that that bouncy castle was temporary. I put up with it for probably like 3 weeks, nearly every single day, until I explained that I work nights and I was being woken up right as I was getting to sleep. So to their credit, they stopped jumping early in the morning and everything was fine, until about 3 weeks ago, when a huge bouncy castle suddenly appeared in their backyard. It was at least 25 feet tall. It completely blocked my view of the mountains so that I could see the kids were able to look right into my bedroom window from the top too. Unfortunately, this coincided with a shift change for me, and now the kids were up until 11 or 12, even 1 a.m. on some nights, and now I had to wake up at 4:30. I didn't even realize it was also a water slide until I realized that probably hundreds of gallons of water had run under our shared fence and actually pushed all my dog's poop up against the back door. I went over and I talked to them, and the dad essentially said, "Oh, we were polite enough to change our schedule for you the first time, and this is our backyard. Screw you." I decided something had to be done because potentially my house could be damaged, let alone the sleep issue. So I called the HOA, and however the machine works, my neighbor had been called in front of the board meeting, fined about $1,000 for covenant violations, as well as being ordered to pay for damages to our joint fence. I thought everything was good, except for some dirty looks from the neighbor, but literally every one of my family and friends are saying I'm the butt for going to the HOA. While opinions do vary, the general gist is now I'm the crabby neighbor ruining kids' fun. Then I should have got some noise-canceling headphones and ignored it, and they would have popped the slide at some point anyways, and it would have taken care of itself. The idea, I guess, is that I tattled and got my way by unleashing a bunch of busybodies with too much free time and too much undeserved power. Commenter Fortune Telling Boobs says, Not the butt. I don't typically side with snitches, but this is pretty clear. The early hour noise and the damage to the property are big no-nos. This HOA story is called Help Navigating a Special Assessment, posted by JNash85. I live in a condo and our HOA is made up of 100 units. I've lived here since 2018. At the time, there was a big deal made about roof repairs. We paid $75 a month in fees, and the HOA is supposed to be responsible for the roof. The only other thing the HOA pays for is lawn maintenance and trash pickup. Back in 2018, they said we had to replace all the roofs and quoted the job around $400 grand. This special assessment was voted down and nothing was said again. Last Saturday was the annual meeting, which I was unable to attend. I came home to find some documents taped to my door stating, "Do not pay your July dues." Basically, one person in the neighborhood is calling for a special meeting to remove 2 of the board members who have been on the board since 2018 and then fire the management company. I came home today and I found another document on my door, this time from the management company, stating that this person is spreading false information, possibly committing fraud, and she is being served with a cease and desist order. The management company also stated that there will be a follow-up meeting in the next 60 days to discuss that special assessment. If it were up to me, these 2 board members would be removed, we would get a new management company, and we would rewrite the bylaws to lower our fees and make each homeowner responsible for their own roof. There are now 2 other development phases, and that is how the HOA is ran. The roof repair does not seem logical to me. The management company has terrible Yelp reviews, some of which state that they tried to run the roof repair scam on their subdivisions. The fact of the matter is, I can afford the proposed assessment if it goes through. At the same time, I don't want a target on my back from the current board members if the vote to remove them goes south. Any advice on how to proceed? Update. Thanks for the replies. To clarify, these are single-floor condos, basically 4 condos in each unit. I do see the problems with everyone being individually responsible for the roofs, and I feel like the fees are pretty low. Honestly, it seems like a lose-lose situation. Even if the roofs do need to be replaced, there's been a lack of transparency around the entire process. On the other hand, even with all of the due diligence done, I still see it getting voted down by the majority of the owners. Most are elderly and probably can't afford it. Advice in the comments says it's not really possible to make each unit in a condo building responsible for their own roof or other common elements. That said, if the management company is pulling a scam and the board is in on it, you should be talking to a lawyer and having experts review the documents. You have a process to remove board members. Follow it. Pay your dues. Always. My neighbor cut my trees, posted by Regular Kahuna with concluded updates. This story has a crazy twist at the end you won't expect. About a month after I moved into my new house, my neighbor cut half a dozen old growth trees, 12 to 23 inch in diameter, in a cold weather climate near the property line. I had a survey done, $800, and discovered that all the trees cut were on my property. The owner of the house is a real estate agent married to a private contractor, so I suspect they knew what they were doing and were trying to take advantage of my ignorance. I have their email address from the HOA, and I'm wondering if I should write a demand letter and send it certified mail, email and ask what's going on, or hire a lawyer. State laws in New Hampshire suggest that I'm entitled to 3 times the value of the trees, but I don't even know how to value the trees. I wouldn't have cut them, and now I have to look at my neighbor's house instead of the trees. Please help. Update 1. I met with a lawyer and gave him my version of events along with estimates from my arborist and the plot from my surveyor. The value of the timber makes the theft a felony in this state, and since the trees were within 55 feet of a protected shoreland, they will likely have to pay a hefty administrative fine to the state for not getting the proper permits before cutting the trees. We know they didn't get the permit because it would have required a survey and shown that trees they had wanted to cut were on my property. The lawyer is familiar with the lady of the house from her real estate dealings, mostly closing and title works, and said she's a pain in the butt and that she doesn't like to admit fault. It's gonna be a long slog. Update 2. It's been a month and we finally gotten a detailed drawing of landmarks from the surveyor to confirm that the surveyor got the lines plotted correctly, comprehensive estimates from a landscaper based on photos provided by the previous owner of the house, and timber values from an arborist. Now that everything is squared away in that regard, we're getting ready to submit a demand letter. The one question my lawyer asked is if I should include a value in the demand letter or if I should invite them to contact my lawyer for further details. What would be the pros and cons of each approach? Final update. Today, they settled with me for $35,000 after legal fees. Bonus update. Neighbor may be poisoning my dog. A few years ago, I won a $35,000 claim against my neighbor when they cut several of my trees down. Since then, they sent hate email, thrown garbage on my lawn, and yelled obscenities at me when I'm in my yard. One email said they'd call the cops if my dog barks, among other really mean things, but I don't have anything else I can show the police. I've just ignored them, except for 2 incidents when I asked her not to throw treats over my 4-foot fence. She just told me to move. She's still very angry nearly 4 years later. Today, I had to take my dog to the vet with ethylene glycol poisoning. I have a fenced side yard that borders my neighbor's yard where we let the dog out to do her business. In the past, usually on weekends, she vomits and we chalked it up to dietary indiscretion, but I bought automotive ethylene glycol test strips on suggestion of a friend. Today, her vomit tested positive for ethylene glycol, so I rushed her to the vet who confirmed she'd ingested antifreeze. They're treating her to the tune of $3,000. While waiting at the vet's office, I ordered a camera to mount in the yard and a basket muzzle to keep her from eating anything in my yard. I don't know what else to do that might connect the dots between the treats I've seen them throw in my yard in the past and the antifreeze poisoning my dog is suffering with today. Do I have any legal recourse? Updates in the comments from OP in response to a comment about the camera. I had a camera there, but it covers my yard, not what the neighbors are doing. I could see where she, or my dog, was messing around reviewing the footage while I was waiting at the vet's office, but my partner couldn't find anything there. I also don't think that it would have caught anything small chucked over the fence, like the treats that I'd seen them throwing before. My dog will be at the vet's office until Tuesday. The meds have to be administered on regular intervals until the poison is out of her system. The house feels very empty right now. In response to a comment telling them to contact the police. Thanks, I made the report this evening. I just have to send them the medical report when the vet releases my doggo. The poster sharing this says, although the part with the dog is somewhat unresolved, it's been a year and the major conflict, the trees, is resolved, so I'm marking this as concluded. HOA in the city contract, aka how the HOA got fined, posted by KiwiFox. So, some quick backstory to this. I don't live with an HOA, thank the divines, but I have had dealings with them. I studied environmental engineering in college, and I have a degree with a specialization in water treatment systems. Normally, though, that's not my day job. Even so, recently, a friend of mine who works with one of the neighboring cities asked me if I wouldn't mind doing some tests for water pollution in a waterfowl preservation area. There had been some strange die-off events going on, and the city was trying to figure out where the source of the pollution was coming from. I'd be operating under a special contract from the city, and I was given access to any location along this waterfowl area, within reason, to perform my test. I won't go into detail about how the tests work, they're involved and can be a pain in the butt, but suffice it to say that I started taking water and soil samples from likely sources along the waterfowl preserve's borders. This showed me that there was a notable amount of nitrates and phosphates in the water, which I surmised was affecting the birds. Now, to find the source. I followed the river up its length, passing a number of housing sites, a couple of apartments, and the odd settling pond. Over the course of several weeks and a barrage of tests, these were ruled out as sources. The further I went up the river, though, the stronger the concentrations became, to the point that it was dangerous for humans to even be in contact with the water. We're talking Superfund type pollution. This was last summer. As I waded up along this area, I heard some splashing and the sounds of kids playing in the water. Not good. Not good at all. Turning the bend, I come face to face with the small dock leading into the water and 4 or 5 kids taking turns jumping off of it into the water. The heavily polluted, dangerous water. There's some lady sitting on the dock watching them, and I approached her. I forget the exchange, but it boiled down to me telling her that I'm from the city, and based on some of what had been found, the children were banned from swimming in the river. The lady tried arguing the point until I told her that I was calling the marshal, code enforcement, to have the area barricaded off, and she could explain her complaints to him. She grabbed the kids and scuttled off. Marshall did arrive, found that the dock was not built with the proper code standards, and condemned it, forcing the HOA who had built it to have it demolished within the week, or the city was going to do it and they'd front the bill. That still left the matter of the pollution. That's where things got weird. Once I passed this HOA subdivision, all pollution vanished. I must have done 5 or 6 further tests to verify this, but yeah, no pollution. So, I had my culprit. The next question was figuring out what they were doing. That's where my investigative side comes in. With the help of the marshal, I started going around the properties of the HOA talking with residents. It was a few simple questions like, do you know if they're fertilizing the grass? And when do they do this? And do you know the type of fertilizer they use? Just gathering evidence. Remember the lady from earlier? Turned out she was the HOA president. I only found this out after she called the police on the marshal and I, reporting strange men wandering around her neighborhood. She called them something like 4 times in a day before the police flat out told her they work with the city and if you keep calling, we're charging you. That didn't stop her from following us around in the car and taking photos of us with her phone. Eventually, we spoke with one older gentleman that broke the case, as it were. The HOA president had been fining people for not having perfectly green grass. We were in a drought at the time, so that's no surprise there. After several of the people in the subdivision got fined by the city for watering their grass, she had taken matters into her own hand. She first tried contracting a landscaper to spray the lawns with fertilizer, but due to various EPA regulations, he apparently refused. The homeowner couldn't be certain what the lady had done next, but a couple days after that, some guys turned up with a large farm-type trailer of liquid and sprayed every single foot of grass that the HOA controlled, even right down to the water's edge. With the homeowner's permission, I took several soil samples from around his property and then samples from the common area that joined the grassy area beside the river and the dock. It took about a week to get full results back, but I had my answer. This lady had some contractors or someone spraying farm-grade fertilizer on the grass. This particular fertilizer is heavily controlled by the EPA and requires a special license to even possess, much less use. I presented all my evidence to my contact at the city and laid out just how serious the damage was, and that I was legally obligated to report the HOA to the state regulatory board for gross violations. My contact took the papers and paid me for my services, thanking me, but also noting that if this went to court, I would need to testify about my findings. Epilogue. The court was originally scheduled for March of 2020, but it never came to that. The HOA president entered a plea deal with the state, where she and the HOA was required to pay for the environmental cleanup of the river, as well as restitution to the state. The fines alone topped close to $250,000, and the cleanup, still ongoing, is expected to break $1 million itself. The HOA president got the boot, while the HOA itself was, last I heard, facing being dissolved by the state due to multiple cases of negligence and inept management. I don't know how they came in contact with that fertilizer, though I suspect that some of the charges against the HOA president had something to do with that. Want to know the sad thing though? If the HOA had simply contacted the city or the state, they would have been given a list of approved fertilizers to use, which both wouldn't have polluted the surrounding water and wouldn't have put them on the hook for an environmental disaster. The number is right on the city and state's website. The HOA just couldn't be bothered to look it up. I think my mom is being scammed and or discriminated against by the HOA. Please help. Posted by Guilty Bee 1562. My mom lives in a condoplex where she purchased a home several years ago, and it's managed by an HOA. When she first moved in, she said that the monthly fees were $240 a month, and then sometimes there are random special assessments. Last year, the complex came under new management, and since then, they have raised the fees to $400 a month. This year alone, she's already paid $10,000 in fees, and she just told me that they have intent to raise them again next year to over $700 a month. Now, I understand that there are always fees associated with owning a condo, but there's several reasons why I have issue with this. And the first is that the complex is not even that nice. It's very old and it doesn't look like much. All of the outside of the buildings, as well as probably the inside, are completely outdated. The second issue I have with this is that from my understanding, the monthly fees are mostly to cover the maintenance for the various amenities in the complex. However, the pool has not been open for use at all this year, and she also said that the clubhouse has never been opened in the 5 years that she's been living there, except for the HOA meetings. So what exactly are those monthly fees going towards? She also sent me a copy of all the charges that have been posted to her account since last year, and some of them just seem completely ridiculous, especially when taking into account that, I'm assuming in all fairness, she's not the only resident that has been charged with these outrageous fees. I found another unit in the complex that was listed not too long ago, and it says that the monthly HOA is $240, which is the original amount that she was paying, so I think it's a little suspicious. But my stepdad told me that the fees for each unit can vary depending on the size and the location in the complex. They sent out a letter with notice of the plans to increase the monthly fees, and they acknowledged in the letter that the community has been neglected for a long time. However, none of us are well versed in the inner workings of the HOA, and we all think that there's something more going on. I have tried telling my mom that she needs to talk to other residents, but she keeps to herself a lot and doesn't feel comfortable doing that. So I'm having to take matters into my own hands to help her with it. By the way, I also think it's worth mentioning that she's a single Asian woman and lives in a predominantly white neighborhood in Alabama. She's had 2 charges this year around $2,500. One says it was for electrical remediation, and the other charge was a violation fine that she said was for peeling paint when she went to go help clean the clubhouse. Do you think that OP has any legal grounds for this? Let me know. Quite a few years ago now, in the late 1990s and very early on in my career, I used to work for a company that helped customers of certain retail stores manage their finances. My role was a sort of compliance officer, ensuring that the staff who dealt with customers were following the rules. If they messed it up, it was a big problem and could potentially impact the customer's credit score, result in them defaulting on payments, and even end up in court. I took my job pretty seriously. The company was not particularly well run from a management perspective. They'd made a lot of money very quickly and had grown from a handful of people in a garage to a 4-story building in the CBD within the space of a year and a half. There wasn't a great deal in the way of policy or process framework, so I had to develop a lot of the tools to do the job myself. This involved some programming, a basic system to track what I was doing, link to the extensive rule set, and automate some of the more tedious reporting. It would also track how long I was spending on each task so that I could see about which elements I could streamline. Now, I was quite proud of this system and called it Hendrix, as I'm a massive Jimi Hendrix fan, and it used to play about 5 seconds of the instrumental version of Little Wing when it started up. As I had my own little room, cupboard, this never used to annoy anyone. I can geek out about that type of stuff. At this point, before corporate IT became rather more rigid, I used to write a lot of my own tools. I was the only person who was using Hendrix, and it was just a tool for me. My manager, the archetypal middle manager, decided that because it allowed you to quickly reference which rules applied to which situation, it should be rolled out to all staff. Now, I had previously considered this, but I argued that I couldn't guarantee that it would be fit for task because I designed it for my own use, and I'd need to make some changes first. But he rolled it out anyway, without me even getting a chance to tweak it. He got a Team Player of the Week award for introducing a tool to make life easier for frontline staff. In his acceptance speech, this was a big rah-rah thing each week for the company, he thanked his manager. I didn't even get a mention. Then, 2 weeks later, he realized that I had been recording how long I had been working on certain tasks within the program. Now, I'd realized fairly quickly that this part of the program was a little too detailed, and I didn't really care too much about every single task within each incident. So I just used it to record how long I spent on the entire incident, rather than each part of the incident. My manager invited me to a meeting about Hendrix, no details given, and I attended thinking it was going to be a list of requested features, only to find out that the head of HR was there and I was being given a written warning for falsifying timekeeping. Because each customer interaction was a certain length, my manager had decided that this was what I should be recording, and not how long I was spending listening to, analyzing, checking, and reporting on the interaction. Remember, this is a tool that I had designed for my own use, and it was not being used to calculate how much I was being paid or whether I was doing enough work during the day or not. There was nothing in place for that at all. I had not made the records public. He'd found them in a file on the server that only he and I had access to. Nobody else was supposed to even have this tool. I argued this and was told that it wasn't up to me, and I was getting a warning regardless. It got really quite heated and unpleasant, though I got the impression that the head of HR was a little embarrassed about the whole thing. They said, however, that if I wanted to consult a lawyer, I was quite within my rights to do so. It was at this point that I was rather smugly able to state that I could get 2 lawyers there within the hour, as both my parents were practicing, and my mother was, in point of fact, an employment lawyer. I realize this is a bit of a deus ex machina, but it only has partial bearing on the story. Suddenly, there was a completely different attitude from my manager. There was an attempt to roll back the issue and turn it into a suggestion that perhaps I should be a bit more careful with my timekeeping in the future. But I was pretty angry at this point. I pointed out that my software had been rolled out to all staff against my wishes. I was told that this wasn't up to me, as it was company intellectual property, until I advised them that I had written it in my own time, at home on my own computer. It was plugging into the official government rule set and not the corporate intranet one. I had not confirmed it fit for general release at all. I had received special dispensation from IT to install it on a single work computer, mine, and I would require them to pay a license fee for anything beyond this. Now, to be fair, this would have been tied up in court for a long time, and I've got no idea whether I'd been successful, so in the end, I relented. If they wanted to use Hendrix, well, I guess they could. I just made sure that Little Wing would play for 1 second longer on startup for every week the software was in use. Then I quit the following Monday and was working for another company by the Monday after that. 3 or 4 months later, I got a phone call from my former manager asking to come fix the problems with my software. He hung up when I quoted him my consultant fees. I don't know why IT weren't able to figure it out. It was just a setting in a text file, not at all hard to find. A friend who remained in the company tells me that they continued to use Hendrix for a whole year. The mornings in the call center were apparently horrifying, with Little Wing playing for around a minute every time someone started a new shift. Sometimes it would play on 20 computers at once, a few seconds apart, on tinny PC speakers that they were unable, due to IT, to mute. Former manager made my life heck, and I finally got her fired, posted by Traveling ABC. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. When I was offered a new role, I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great, and that part has not changed. However, since my manager, Gary, was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane. I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, move or cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said that I was too big for my race. The list of personal slights so long that it filled 3 pages. I would talk back to her, and she did not like that, and that provoked her more. I only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. I finally had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team who I didn't even know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy. I couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane, and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised, considering half her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him. I was thrilled. Well, turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I am not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter and stapled a list of Jane's offensive comments and CC'd everyone. Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try to keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go, and he didn't have the authority to let her go. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done. So I left, loudly and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for about 3 months. There were nights that we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and the emergency expenses from a health crisis and funeral. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying to like 5 or 10 roles per day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company that I just left. I used to work with this guy closely, and I texted him "Congrats, let me know if you need any insights on the new place." We had a quick call to where I told him some of the ins and the outs where I thought that they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff, and I accepted. Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new big shot in a giant conference room. In Big Shot's speech, he breezed over that I'll be his chief of staff, along with a few key names. I now sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently within the 3 months that I wasn't there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent Big Shot an email about how I'm an unqualified idiot, that I used to work for her and how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects that I lied to get ahead. She didn't even try to be fake nice. Big Shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know, I was a director at Big Shot's competitor company and was already a level above her, so 2 levels isn't a big leap, and I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour call with Big Shot, and I told him that she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general. But the evidence that he needed was Gary confirming that her whole team had turned over, my prior resignation letter, which was still sitting on my desktop when I logged in upon return, and a few other nasty emails that she sent her recent staff, which they were happy to share with us. Big Shot fired Jane on Friday. This story takes place in an HOA entitled "Neighbors Demand I Fix My Fence," posted by Wobro. This one happened maybe about 10 years ago, but just came to mind. I'd purchased a house with my wife when I was about 26. We were definitely the kids of the neighborhood, but we were excited to get started making the home ours. All of our issues stemmed with one of the next door neighbors. This started with basic entitlement. The landscaping in the section of the property that bordered theirs was pretty horrific, made worse by how the previous homeowner stored their RV there. There were some paver stones creating a little walkway across our front lawn. We set about to fix this whole section first, moving all the old landscaping rocks, building a retaining wall, putting down landscaping fabric, and moving the rocks back. Took an entire summer. Looks great now. Not good enough for the neighbor. The old lady says, "I use that pathway when I walk between these houses." And I reply, "Well, hey, I would much prefer you use the sidewalk if you need to come to my door." Well, when are you going to clean up the rocks on my yard? She wanted me to do the same thing I did on my side of the property to her section. Yeah, sorry, you're going to need to hire a landscaper. Fall rolls around, as does winter. She made sure to point out to me the previous homeowner used to clean the leaves off of my yard and used to shovel my walkway and driveway for me. Yeah, maybe if she'd ever been polite to me, I would have considered helping out an elderly neighbor. So now the real story begins. It's the middle of winter, and I'm keeping pretty busy being dad to our new baby and going back to school. It's finals week. We find a note on the door. Your fence has fallen onto our property, and we cannot get out of our house. Well, how'd you post this on my door? So I go out back and I take a look. Sure enough, a few sections of the fence have failed. It's leaning against their house, preventing access to the back gate. So I call my dad, and he shows up with tools in his truck, and we proceed to dismantle the broken fence sections, put up some temporary fencing, and clean up. I'm going to have to do some grading work and dig out the old concrete footers to fix this right. The ground is frozen solid, so this will need to wait. The next day, I hear some commotion out by the fences. It's old lady and old man. Wife and I go to see what's going on. As we approach, they are both standing out by the temporary fencing, scowling, shaking their heads no. Hi there. This is not acceptable. What do you mean? We put this up for now, but you need to fix your fence. Excuse me? I need to fix my fence? Yes, this is not acceptable. This fence was here before we built our house. Total lie. Her house was built before mine. This is public record, and I have documentation that shows this. It was provided to me during the sale. Okay, what do you mean? This should suffice for fine just now, just to keep the dogs out of each other's properties. You need to put up a 6-foot privacy fence. At this point, I'm just ticked. The fencing that borders my other neighbor's property has fallen before, and we both worked together and split the cost of the repairs. Oh, do I? Well, if it's my fence, I don't need to do anything. In fact, I could remove the rest of the fencing as you are claiming it belongs to me. No, you need to put up a 6-foot privacy fence. Says who? Not the state, not the city. The HOA says so. I have documentation stating that the HOA was disbanded 20 years prior. There is no HOA. It was disbanded in 1987. Then who am I sending checks to every month? Oh man, I have no clue, lady, but it's definitely not the HOA. Oh, it figures you wouldn't pay your HOA dues. You are the worst neighbor ever. I'm done here, lady. There is no HOA, and since you stated this fence is my property, I'll do whatever I want with it. The only requirement here is that I keep my dog out of your yard, and this temporary fence, it'll do just fine. The old man says, I'm gonna rip this fence down and then you'll see what happens when your dog comes onto my property. The old man is blind, but he has a very angry vibe to him, and he has NRA stickers all over his cars. I know what he's implying here. Sir, if you damage my property and lay one finger on my dog, I will have you thrown in prison so freaking fast your head spins. What did you just say? You come say that to my face. Yeah, right, dude. So I grab my wife and we walk back into the house. A few days later, code enforcement shows up. They come out and they inspect the fencing section. Code enforcement informs them there is no code that dictates any type of fence, and since he cleaned up all the debris, there is no code violation. Or is there? As I can now see, the old lady and man's backyard is 100% weeds. Some of these weeds are at least 6 feet tall. Some of these weeds are considered noxious, meaning that you are legally required by the state to kill them and remove them. So I send a letter to code enforcement, and the next day, I see the old lady scowling at me, trying to drag a trash bag full of weeds out of her backyard. I did fix the fence a few weeks later, after finals, when the ground had thawed out just a bit and I could do it right. So this starts on a Monday, the 13th, as I receive an email from a VP not over my department, or bad VP. I'm told that my team will be required on the 4th. I politely tell them that no, our team has been scheduled this day off and people already have plans. My team is the IT team, and as many of you know, IT team gets, shafted every time that it can get shafted by, any company. So over the course of the week, I let my team know what's happening. I let them know that I've been reaching out to higher ups to fix it, and I also tell them that if their plans are ruined, I'll make it right at work. Over the course of 3 meetings, it starts to look like things will not go my way. In response, I send an email to the CEO of the company. All of my higher-ups know that I was going to do this and said that I should do this, as he is very family-oriented and that he would not allow anyone to work on a national holiday. Well, he's on vacation in the Bahamas until the 6th, but his assistant informed me that he would look at this after he gets back. I repeatedly slammed my head into the desk. So, I tell everyone that it'll be work from home and that we'll be setting my cell phone as priority in the call routing, meaning that I would get most of the calls. To be honest, well, I was expecting almost 0 calls, especially since I was asked to send out a notification that IT support would cover the 4th of July. I never sent that email out. A day later, I was given another outrage. I was told in an email that my employees would be required to be at the office and no one was allowed to work from home. They would be checking the door badge ins to verify that we were at the office. I asked why in an email, and they said that they wanted to make sure no one was playing video games at work. We normally work from home about 2/3 of the week, and video game playing is a normal occurrence at work. So I walked into the person's office, and after a very long conversation where she was losing the logic war with me, she told me that it's just IT, you guys don't even have lives. No, I'm not kidding you, that's exactly what they told me. I reported this to my VP, who said, I'll take care of this, it likely won't be until after the 4th, so get creative. I know this man well. We have worked together for a long time, and get creative is code word for corporate screwery. I asked the person requiring us to be at the office if they cared if we had an office party. They said no, as long as it didn't interfere with the call flow. Even suggested using my new company card to pay for it. Go wild. Pro tip, never tell me to go wild. At this point, it was Tuesday the 21st. I let everyone know what's up, but that I have something planned. I asked who had things planned for that day, and 2 people told me that they were planning to shoot off fireworks with their family, but the rest were planning barbecues with friends. I write up an email to the VP over my department and the bad VP. I tell them all that I had let everyone know. We all were expected to work until 8 p.m. on Monday. Per the conversation with the bad VP, I'll be having an office party as sort of a sorry to the guys and the gals who got shafted by this decision. The bad VP replied again, thank you for your understanding. Also, yes, I would expect an office party if I had to work on the 4th of July as well, so go wild and enjoy your time. Use your new company credit card if you need to cover a few expenses. Also, I should not have to remind you or anyone else. No fireworks or alcohol on company property. So now it's time to tell you about my office. See, a while back, the IT team was moved from the main corp office and into a smaller building by itself. It has a nice gaming break room, a decent-sized gym, and a full-on drink bar. Soft drinks, mind you, no alcohol at work. Out back is a big patio that crosses county lines as soon as you cross a small creek. A creek that just so happens to have a footbridge over it, leading to an empty field. I start making phone calls. Monday, June the 25th. I call up everyone into an hour early meeting that morning, and I explain to them all that I will be making it right. I asked everyone to invite their friends and the family to the office. No supplies will need to be brought by anyone. Now I tell them all that this will be non-alcoholic, but that I will be planning something for everyone. I told them to expect all food to be provided, and they don't need to bring anything unless they want to bring some fireworks, i.e. they won't have to spend a dime. The 4th comes, and the entire day we did absolutely no work. No tickets, no calls came in. Well, 7 calls did come in, but from the same person, the bad VP. She was calling to make sure we were manning the phones. All of us were playing video games or watching movies. 6 p.m. rolls around, and everyone was told that the food was ready. People were expecting hot dogs, hamburgers, maybe a bratwurst or 2, and what they got was a full-on barbecue feast with pizza and other foods. There was smoked brisket, spare ribs, smoked sausage, smoked turkey, both kinds of tater salad, coleslaw, green beans with bacon and onion, potatoes au gratin, pizza from 2 different places, excellent hamburgers, and bratwurst hot dogs. On the dessert side was cake, very good cookies, 4 different kinds of pies, and about 2 pounds of fudge. Families and friends started showing up at around 6:15ish. Some brought alcohol, but I told them that they would need to leave that in their cars as I was not that crazy. Some were not too happy about that, but agreed as it was a free dinner for random strangers. So let me set the scene for you. I'm out there with all the calls routed to my cell phone, and everyone just having a good time. We have a ton of people that are just there enjoying the fun night, chatting about random stuff, eating the food, and occasionally lighting off some sparklers or throwing firecrackers into the stream. It's not stocked and it's only like 1 foot deep. My VP, not the bad VP mind you, showed up with his family, brought some water balloons for the kids and man-children. Around 8:30ish, it's getting dark and people want to shoot off more than the simple sparklers and the firecrackers that we'd been using. The VP over the IT department had everyone cross the footbridge, over county line, and off company property, mind you, and we set up a big wooden board using it as our launch pad. We fired off what we had for about an hour or two and sort of just hung out for a little while. At around this time, people were tired and ready to head home. I told people just take home leftovers within reason. We all clocked out at around 8 and no one left until about 10:30. The bad VP did call once more while we were out back at the party, and it was 7:50 and she called asking for a status update. My exact words were, "Well, you were the only one to call us today. The rest of us are on the back patio enjoying the 4th of July shindig." She simply acted like my boss and said, "As long as no alcohol or fireworks are on company property, I do not care." We ate roughly half of the food catered. The rest was taken home. A small group volunteered to stay behind to clean up, including my VP. We had a funny conversation about how this is going to make waves with the bosses, but he said that he had my back and asked me how much this cost. I just gave him a sideways look, which made him laugh. Tuesday morning, I submitted the expense report to my VP. This email would inevitably make its way over to the bad VP and up the chain to the CIO of the company. It would be a bad idea to give out the exact cost of the party, mind you, but I can tell you that because of this 4th of July party, new rules were put into place. Any expenses of over $4,000 or more must be approved by the direct supervisor, VP over the department, and the full expense report must be sent to the financial department for review after the fact. Hint, the party cost over $6,000. The barbecue was the most expensive part. I didn't order from like a low or a mid-tier place because the place that I ordered from has consistently been on top 10 in the DFW listing for the last 30 years. I ate at that place so much that I made friends with the owner. The best barbecue that I have ever had. The pies and the cakes were custom made by a bakery, and the cookies were made by a boutique cookie place. I had like 10, 12 packs of Coke, Coke Zero, Dr. Pepper Zero, Pepsi, Pepsi Zero. I bought 5 pepperoni, 5 sausage, 5 cheese, 2 Hawaiian, and 3 cheeseburger pizzas from one place, and nearly the same number from another place. Excluding the cheeseburger ones, I subbed out those for a different specialty pizza from the other place. The burgers were from an excellent burger place that did catering. I know that owner well. He brought his kids for the night of fun after he'd heard what was going to be happening, and he was also the one who brought the brat dogs as he recently added those to his menu. This was the most expensive office party in the history of the company. The only things more expensive than this were some business meetings that the CEO rented private rooms in high-end restaurants for. As for the CEO, he was outraged. Not at the cost of the party, mind you. He knew the party would not have been necessary if people had been allowed to go home. He was outraged that IT was the only group required to work on that day. When I submitted the log showing how we received no real phone calls, no service requests, and that we basically watched movies and played video games during our shift, he'd heard enough. He apparently sent out a scathing email about work-life balance and the importance of our holidays to every upper management. It's kind of funny, as people wanted me to get in trouble for what I did, but the reality is other departments have done similar things in the past, just not on the scale that IT did. The bad VP was admonished quite effectively and sent me an apology email. I forwarded it to the team with a strong hint to not reply. Then my VP let the CIO and the CEO know about what the bad VP said. You guys don't have lives. The bad VP did actually confirm that she said it in a meeting with her EVP. It did not go over well. I've never heard people yelling in an office meeting like that before. I mean, the CEO of the company came to our office and yelled at her. I'm not sure if she was fired, but she is not at work today. In an Active Directory, she does not have the down arrow of death, so not 100% of what happened to her. I know that she lost whatever clout she had at this company with her attitude. If anything more happens, I will update. But so far, it looks like the fallout from this is that I caused a new rule to be put into place about how much you're allowed to spend at one time. The bad VP may or may not be let go or forced to resign, but I know she got yelled at. Strangely, there is now no longer any pushback for my bid to get everyone back to working from home. Make my coworkers cry? I will help karma turn your life upside down. Posted by Ancient Ice. Backstory. I worked at this hotel for over 2 years and was one of 2 people left that went through the training when our hotel changed hotel franchises. During this training, we were told about certain rules the company had. So here's the cast. The manager is the front desk manager. He was only here for 4 to 6 months at this point. Me, I'm a nice guy, unless you're a bully or an entitled person. And there's a few others that I'll mention as we go through. The story. One afternoon, I was scheduled to work second shift, 3 to 11. I walked in, and both AM front desk coworkers looked like that they'd been massively crying as their makeup was smeared. My manager looking quite ticked. I ask, "Hey, what's wrong?" Manager says, "We have a major jerk as a guest. This guy is the highest level on the rewards for the hotel chain. He's very demanding, and he wants free upgrades, free this or that, and he screams anytime he has an interaction with the staff. This guy has made every department call me complaining about him. Now this guy just came to the desk, and he screamed at these 2 coworkers until they were both crying." These 2 ladies were fresh high school graduates and were very sweet and innocent people. They loved helping people and didn't deserve this treatment. As he is explaining this, I look up this guy's room details. Once my manager finishes explaining everything this guy had done, I see this guy's info and I had a smile from ear to ear. I reply, "Hey, didn't you see that he's an employee of a different hotel?" Manager says, Yeah, but so what?" I replied, well, first off, while you travel as an employee, you're required to behave and be respectful. It's in the fine print on the discount form." I grabbed this form and showed it to the manager. Failure to be respectful can lead to having your employee discount suspended or permanently revoked and even get you terminated. You need to call this guy's hotel and ask for the GM, then explain to him who you are and what this guy is doing. I look up the hotel phone number and call the hotel and then handed my manager the phone. Manager, after his call-ins with the GM, he has an evil and satisfying smile on his face. His GM is steaming mad after I described all the stuff this guy has done. The main switchboard phone rings. I answered, "Hello, thank you for calling hotel name. How may I direct your call?" Caller says, "I want to speak to entitled jerk's room, please." I replied, "Absolutely, sir. Have a nice day." Transfer the call and looked at my manager and saying with a sarcastic tone, "Someone wanted to talk to entitled jerk. Gee, I wonder who that could be." Manager continues after he stopped laughing. The GM gave me his personal cell phone number and said that if I have any more issues at all to call him immediately. I'm leaving the phone number next to the switchboard. If you need it, call him. I told manager, "Hey, your revenge is done. Now for my revenge." Manager wide-eyed said, "Oh crap, what are you going to do?" Me, smiling a very evil smile. "Hey, you'll see." I pick up the phone to make a call. "Hello, Hotel Rewards customer service. Yes, I would like to report someone using reward account while using an employee discount on his stay." Customer service says, "He can't do that." I replied, "I know, I'm calling to report him." I gave her the guest reservation number and the rewards member number. I continued, "Hey, I bet anything, if you dig through this guy's history, you'll find all his stays are probably at employee discount." Customer service says, "I'm starting a ticket to have this guy's account investigated." I replied, "Thank you." Then hang up the phone. The manager watched as I then remove his rewards number from his stay. My manager had a huge grin on his face. That was awesome. I explained, "Oh hey, I am not quite finished with him yet. It's time to go spread the news to all the departments that he's no longer a rewards member." I made a new key for his room without concierge access. I walked around to every department. As I explained why I was stopping by, everyone had the same reaction as soon as I mentioned the guy's name. "Oh gosh, what about this jerk?" I finished explaining how he was no longer a rewards member, and if he gives anyone issues, to call the front desk immediately, and his GM already probably tore him a new one just a minute ago. Everyone was so happy at this news. I finally went to the concierge room, used the guest's new key to void his current key, and then I walked into the room and explained the information to the evening concierge. She cringed at the mention of his name after explaining that she would not have to deal with him again, and asked her to leave the morning person a note about this guy not allowed in the concierge room anymore. She was very happy. While I was gone, evidently the manager explained what we did to the 2 a.m. front desk ladies. The minute I got back to the desk, both my front desk coworkers all came up to me and gave me a huge hug and thanked me so many times. Manager to me after the other coworkers went home said, "Hey, do me a huge favor, please." I replied, "Yeah, sure, what's up?" Manager said, "If I ever tick you off, please come tell me so I can fix the issue." Later that night, entitled jerk comes to the desk, hat in hand, politely saying his key doesn't work. I replied, "Oh, so sorry about that. Let me make you a new key," in the best fake smile that I can muster. Aftermath. The next day, I check his rewards account and it is now suspended. I check back the next week. Sorry, account number not found. Accidentally burned down my neighbor's fence and she tries to milk me for $10,000. Judge humbles that butt up real quick. Posted by T-Bird Kamikaze. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows. I have no idea why. But being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 a.m. Also, I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I say, why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We go into my backyard where it hasn't rained in well over 2 months and is extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparkies from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and it made 2 small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was of no use. It was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called 911. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm to grab their hose and spray down the fence along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department shows up finally and I tell my friend, "Only one of us needs to get in trouble. You should leave." He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him that I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson and fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later, I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I opened the door and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document with no logo or company name. She then adds, "I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water." Now, the fence that this woman had before was raggedy and fallen apart. Her yard? Dead grass, weeds everywhere, never even mowed it. Now, looking at this paper, she wants a mahogany fence, a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges. I said, "I need to get an estimate myself. This just doesn't feel right." She says, "Remember you agreed to replace my fence, and a real man keeps promises." I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened, and he flipped the heck out and told me, "Son, don't you give that jerk a single dime." He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day, I had the guy come out for an estimate, and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. "I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence." Technically, it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences. She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes an estimate off at about $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care from my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I get these estimates, I give copies to the woman, and she's having none of it. I don't know these people, I don't want them near my house, and they're probably some really crappy contractors. I said, no, I know them personally, and they're really nice people, and they do great work. She shut the door in my face, and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night, and I got home at 8 a.m., and this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demanded I speak to her. I explained, hey look, I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep. She goes, what kind of crazy lazy butt sleeps in until 2 p.m.? At this point, I had about lost it and told her, you can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my butt and get nothing. She stood there for a while with her mouth gaped open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night after I got off work writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning, I wake up and grab this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I get a call from her saying, I'm sorry, the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project and you will be paying me full price. Oh, really? After that, I did not say a single word to her, and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out, she had plans to remodel these things for a long time and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also in this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now, 4 months after the fire and all of the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old, I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court, I lay everything out. The quotes, being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law by the way, and her bragging about screwing me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your daggone mind. Not only did this young man tell you the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than what he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred, therefore he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees of $800. So I'm thinking, so I burned this woman's fence down and all I'm having to give her is $400? Cool. She took a huge financial loss from this. Not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since. Now I do need to clear a few things up. I am not saying that I don't feel bad for burning down my neighbor's fence. I felt really bad about it and wish we could have handled it more civilly. I would have been happy to meet in the middle or get multiple quotes. To this day, I still do not use fireworks because we could have really hurt someone. What I have learned through this though is that it's best to take responsibility from your actions from the gate. The fire investigator had seen the leftover fireworks near the area of the fire and said he would have slapped cuffs on me and I would be in jail for arson if I would have given him any other answer. I was not criminally charged and the incident was deemed an accidental fire. Thank you for the people in the comments for giving me information about how much a fence actually cost. I've never had to purchase a fence before, so I just believed what the contractor had told me without second thought. Terrible neighbors today, and one's from the HOA. Neighbors that will never be satisfied. Posted by Maggie 102899. So our neighbors of a few years have increasingly caused issues with us over how we do things in our yard. When my mom tried to build a fence to separate us, they protested and got our other neighbors' support. Their current issue with us is that our sprinklers have been staining their driveway. My mom has gotten our landscaper to adjust the sprinklers at least 3 times already, but the husband keeps complaining even though the water barely gets on their driveway. I wonder how he feels when it rains, jeez. My sister saw him in our yard messing with our sprinklers the other day. We don't know what to do. Just now, my mom was watering our plants and both the wife and husband came outside to berate her. The husband started yelling at her and the wife ordered his little witch self inside, but then she continued to yell at my mom. They're always watching us. I don't feel comfortable swimming in our pool, which is such a shame and waste. We just got it remodeled. We are getting the landscaper to come out this week to fix the sprinklers again, but we know they'll just complain again. Any ideas? This causes my mom so much stress, and the wife is always acting innocent and confused as to why my mom gets upset with her. It causes stress throughout our whole family. My little sister is breaking down in tears right now. There's a lot more information that I can share to clear things up, but I just wanted to share what their current complaint was to us. They will never leave us alone. Once we fix one thing for them, they find another. And no, we're not going to move. We've lived in this house for over 20 years. This commenter gives OP a suggestion and we get an HOA answer back. Put up a fence, tell the jerks to stay off your property and call the police if they harass you. And OP says, initially we had HOA rules saying that we couldn't put up a wooden fence, and thanks to these neighbors and them trying to get more rules enacted, the HOA for our neighborhood eventually disbanded. While all of this was happening and my mom was believing she couldn't build a fence, she instead got bushes planted that are meant to grow and give us privacy, spending a lot of money instead of spending it on a fence. These bushes are still knee level even after 2 years, so it's going to take a while. We've even had to deplant a few bushes because of these neighbors. We have a creek running behind both our backyards, and sometimes the city needs to come and check the pipeline that runs through it, and our neighbors wouldn't allow the city to drive on their driveway, so we had to move 4 of those bushes so they could get access and drive through our yard on the grass. Now those bushes are sitting in 4 pots awaiting to be moved if needed. When we first got the bushes, a lot of them had been dying for no reason, and we had to get them replaced. We have a suspicion that our neighbors tampered with them because our landscaper said it looks like someone put something on the bushes to kill it, and we would never do this. These bushes are right next to their driveway, by the way. We also had individual sprinklers placed to water each bush, but they kept malfunctioning or getting cut. Like, come on, that has to be them. So, this definitely hasn't helped in their growth and is another reason we have our regular sprinklers on. Now my mom has to walk out and manually water each bush. My mom spent all this money for an alternative for a fence and is very hesitant about building an actual one. Also, if we did build one, our neighbors would give us absolute heck and the city wouldn't be able to access the pipeline in our creek. We'd have to dig up all of the bushes and move the fence over to give them enough clearance. My mom now regrets this decision. Also, the wife is always texting my mom complaining about things, and I've told my mom to block her number, but she can still come out and yell at us in person. Any more ideas or thoughts? Another update. Whenever I do go outside, whether in my backyard or pool, which unfortunately faces their house, the dad always seems to come outside to do something like wash his car or mow. Also, he mows at least 10 times a week or does the leaf blower early in the morning and during the day multiple times and awakes me from sleeping and naps. My family thinks it's his way of getting away from his wife, so he keeps everything pristine outside so he doesn't have to deal with her inside. I've also seen them looking out their kitchen window into our yard on several occasions. I will mention, we never had any problems with them until my dad died a few years ago, and the wife even mentioned the first time they complained about something that my dad would have been more compliant, that they never had any issues with him, but that was before they started complaining. My dad never did anything to help around in the backyard, so it's not like anything has changed. It actually looks a little nicer now. We've added a stone pathway and an arch with flowers around it and so on. Super good comment says, ignore, wear headphones, do not react. Seriously, no reaction will kill her. If she escalates into violence, throwing things and so on, call the cops and always record her. No reaction. Seriously. And OP unfortunately says, I'll get my mom to try this, but the wife literally gaslights my mom by saying, I don't know why you're mad, we've always been nice to you. She acts innocent and confused as to why my mom is angry. It's infuriating. And we have an answer. I'm putting up these privacy fence screens around the metal fence that surrounds our pool for a little more privacy. I'm doubling them for even more privacy. My mom doesn't love the look of them though, but this is a temporary fix for a little more privacy. Neighbors trespassing because they don't like my yard, posted by Lizarding Loudly. Hi there, I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood in a small town. I've never been one for lawn maintenance. I actually hate lawns and view them as a frickin' scam. And my next door neighbor to the east is obsessed with her lawn, watering it every day, even in 100-degree weather, mowing it once a week, having her grandson mow, I should say. It's always dark green with no weeds. That's fine with me, it's her yard. However, I don't believe in wasting water for vanity, nor do I like emissions from lawnmowers. I have an electric one. Have I ever, or would I ever, say anything about this to her? Nope, because again, it's her lawn. I'm sure you can see where this is going. I let my lawn get pretty long, mostly from how busy I am. On top of a full-time job, half an hour away, I'm a gigging musician and spend several weeknights and weekends out of town. I also just don't really believe in lawns. I'm hoping to plant a clover one this fall after I check city ordinances. It doesn't help either that it took a while to get my hands on a string trimmer, and I was only very recently able to afford the yard cart to have the city take yard waste to the compost pile. I refuse to just throw it away. Organic matter does not need to go into the regular trash. Anyways, I guess between her, the house directly across the street, and my neighbors on the other side, this has become a hot topic and one they discuss between themselves. Recently, someone called the city on me over the backyard, which no one can see except for a glimpse from each direct neighbor's driveway. Also, the daughter-in-law of the neighbor to the east has messaged me asking if I would please let her son mow because my yard is affecting her mother-in-law's sanity, and has also offered to come help because my neighbors are really upset about it. Multiple times this week, someone had come onto my property to mow or weed whack or move stuff around while I'm at work. They don't talk to me about it first, they don't leave a note, they just do it. Someone also broke some of the pots on my side porch, which I realized may have been an accident, but it's still annoying. I got home from work last night intending to mow the front because it is a little long even for me. I spent time a few days ago pulling weeds in preparation to mow, even making sure to cut off the blown dandelion heads and then throw them in the waste bin separately so it wouldn't spread seeds. I have to mow the lawn in segments so my mower can charge, but when I got home yesterday, someone had already mowed. I have been making progress in other areas, cleaning up leaves, putting more stuff in the garage so it's not visible, and so on. I'd like to think they're being helpful, but I'm almost positive they're doing it for them, not me. I don't like that they're coming onto my property without asking. I don't want to create a huge rift in the neighborhood, but it's so annoying. In my opinion, if your neighbor's yard bothers you so much, talk to them directly or go to therapy or both. Should I leave everyone a note asking them to please stay off my property? Visit houses individually? Like I said, I'm not wanting to get antagonistic about it, but I seriously want everyone to stop getting in my stuff. I'm sure to some people I am the neighbor from heck, and that's fine if that's how you feel. I understand that everyone values different things. Update from OP. A commenter says, I wish my neighbors would mow my lawn. I have to pay somebody to mow it. And OP says, I've gone that route in the past. Jerk just ran over some of my flowers with his mower, obviously pretty ones that were under the mailbox and had every right to be there. And he said he wouldn't mow unless I paid him to come every week, which I understand from a business model point of view, but I don't make that kind of money for that kind of expense. One commenter jumps on OP and says, not believing in lawn care does not mean you don't have to maintain it. Either put the clover lawn in ASAP or cut your grass before it becomes a jungle. And OP replies, it's maintained, just not up to their standards, I guess. I'm hoping to work in the clover lawn in this fall. It can't be planted when it's too awful hot, and it's in the hundreds every day around here for a while. Great comment here. An overgrown yard isn't just an eyesore, it's a breeding ground for snakes and rodents. That does affect your neighbors. Watching my neighbors enjoy their backyard when they won't allow us to enjoy ours. Posted by Luna Sosike. With an update. We have retired neighbors who were friendly when we moved in. It started with a quick wave over the fence. It has now escalated to every time they hear any of us in the backyard, they rush out and stand at their fence until we have to pass them again. Now there's only one way in and out of our yard, to listen to them talk. We'll often say bye and walk away and they're still talking. They'll often say, oh, all right, bye, as we close the door behind us to return inside. I always dreamed of having a big backyard and I'm so frustrated that now we don't use it. At one point, one of the neighbors broke their leg. This isn't stopping her. Her husband came over, engaged us in conversation to stall us so his wife could come over too. She was hobbling along and complaining that she was in such pain as she leaned on the fence. Now, before you think they're lonely, they're not. I see their children and grandchildren over often. The breaking point was we bought a new pressure washer and wanted to test it out in the backyard. We were out there with our daughter and she was oohing and eyeing. It was a cute family moment. Of course, the neighbors took their spot on the fence and started just yelling to speak over the pressure washer. It was crazy to watch. The only person that goes into our yard now is the lawn care guy. I go out occasionally to pick fruit, but we haven't used our yard in months. My daughter and I play out in the front as we get more privacy facing a main street than we do in the backyard. Yesterday, a friend came over and wanted to see the orange trees that we have. We were on the other side of the yard when the neighbor came out and stood on the fence as usual. Even having a guest didn't deter her. I hurried my friend back inside as the neighbors essentially talked to herself. The update. A few months ago, I made a post about my neighbors that would not let us spend time in our backyard without sucking up all of our spare time with their chatter. I know it seems excessive, but we are a time-poor family. I work 4 days a week, my husband works full-time, I study full-time, and we have a toddler. In order to make it all work, my husband and I work alternating days, so we get only a few days off altogether a month. So you can imagine how angry I was that each time we wanted to spend family time outside, my neighbor would be there telling me about the time her baby died, how sick her sister is, how sick they have been, or some other tragedy. Anyway, I read through everyone's comments, cheers by the way, and while I can't construct a way to block their view of us, I took the rest of your advice. I starved them of attention until we weren't a viable source anymore. Each time that I went out, I would smile, nod, and then put all my headphones in and carry on with what I needed to do. Mowed the lawn, picked up dog junk, cleaned out the garden beds, played with the dog. It took about 3 months, but they got the message. I was annoyed each time that I had to go out because it felt like a chore stacked onto another chore. Now I had to go mow my lawn, but also ensure that I didn't make eye contact with the fence that I knew my neighbors were standing at, desperately trying to get my attention so they could tell me about their latest bout of gastro. I'm still not comfortable trying to go out into the backyard to spend time as a family because I'm anxious they'll harass us again. It's slow progress, but hopefully once the weather warms up, we'll be back to having backyard picnics. Please help. What rights do I have as a renter being targeted by the HOA? Posted by Do Association 5112. I moved into my apartment about 2 months ago. Each 3-bedroom apartment unit only gets 2 parking spaces, leaving the third person with no spot. I was worried about this issue and voiced the concern to my roommates, but they assured me that there's parking spots about 2 blocks away from a nearby townhome community that I can park in. In worst case, I can use the guest spots on the property. They've done it for years. The security guard also told me that I could get a guest pass from him to park there if I didn't see any. Long story short, I got home at 3 a.m. one night and there were no parking spots and I was forced to leave my car in a guest spot. I didn't find security for a guest pass for 4 hours, and when I checked in my car at 7 a.m., it had a parking violation that read, "Car does not come back to any resident." I didn't think anything of it. 2 days later, we are told by our property manager that the HOA wants us out immediately. Our property manager fought for us to at least get 60 days, and for legal reasons, they were forced to grant us 60 days. We had already signed our intent to renew and had another girl moving in at the end of the month for our new lease, which we had to cancel due to us being possibly kicked out. I spoke to the property manager, and it turns out that I was the last straw because of the past roommate's parking violations and abuse of guest passes, which I can't blame her because we don't have a right to park on property. I see cars with parking violations all the time, and I can guarantee that they are not being threatened to be kicked out after a parking violation with no written warning or notice. No communication is ever given with these kind of violations. My roommates didn't even know about the past roommates' violations either. It doesn't seem fair that we can all be punished. It also states on the parking violation that towing is the consequence of parking there, not getting kicked out. Technically, they are only not letting us renew our lease, and that's how they get around it as a loophole. Now we are 1. Left to pay an empty room that we can't afford because no one's going to move in for just 1 or 2 months. And 2, I paid tons of HOA fees, application fees, moving costs to move in that I should not be forced to do again 2 months later. They are giving me and my roommate 60 days to figure out what to do, and we feel lost, targeted, and bullied with no voice. What kind of rights do I have as a renter? Are they allowed to do this? Please help. This Karen story takes place in an HOA. Immigrant Karen becomes an absolute menace to our neighborhood, posted by Ryan the Sith Lord. So for a bit of context, I live in the East Coast of the United States. I moved into a complex with an HOA. For paying the HOA, we get many benefits like free parking, free usage of the pool and the gym, and other benefits. There are way too many individual stories of the Karen to include in one post, so I'll go through the story that involves my family. My parents go to the pool for the first time a few weeks after moving in. Before they even set their stuff down, the lady, oh man, this lady. We had no idea what we signed up for. The first thing she says to them is, "Are you an owner or a renter?" "Excuse me," my dad says. They go back and forth and they introduce themselves to each other. The thing that makes her stand out among everyone else is her accent. Because I respect her privacy, I won't be saying what country she's from, and all I'll say is that she wasn't born in America, and she has an extremely thick accent. So her disputes with people can actually be somewhat funny to watch. Eventually, we became friends with her. She was very nice to us, but one fateful day, she didn't show up to the pool. This was very odd for her, as if the pool was open, well, she was there, and she was there on time. Other neighbors tell us that she was going to go get scanned as she had some sort of growth in her thyroid. She comes back, and she came back with a vengeance. After making friends with multiple different families in the complex, me and my dad would do work for them. We did handyman work for one older couple, and they loved it so much, the word got out, and now we do work for many people in our complex. Eventually, we start doing work for our immigrant neighbor. My dad and her husband negotiate what we're going to do for them, and they came up with a plan and a price. So we go there, we do our thing, and they come back, and they make us do a lot more work than we bargained for. It not only tired us the heck out, but it also made us work for another 2 non-bargained hours. We were exhausted, and my dad said, "Hey, not for nothing, but all these extra things you made us build and hang were not part of our original deal." And my dad asked if they could pay us a little more. Karen leaves and asks her husband to deal with my dad. A massive argument ensues, and eventually, me and my dad just leave. Her husband told her that he threatened him, which he did not do at all. Trust me, I was there with him. She calls my dad and they get into a huge fight on the phone and they cut ties. Around this same time, I started making friends of my own. A boy similar to my age and his younger sister come up to me and we started talking. Eventually, the parents all started talking and we all became friends. The only problem is, they are really close with the Karen that we don't like. One day at the pool, she goes on a psychotic rant and starts saying really nasty crap to my parents. She was sitting at the table with the mother of my new friends and she heard the whole thing. That day, we found out that she has anxiety because my mom goes to the bathroom after the fight and she sees her in the ladies' room crying. She comes out and apologizes on Karen's behalf. We're still friends with them to this day, but it can get complicated hanging out because they are always with her. Karen says all the negative stuff that she wants about us to them. They all just shrug it off and tell her not to talk like that. Since I hang out with my friends a lot, my friend that's my age, who I see the most, makes my mom a card for her birthday. Unbeknownst to me, he put change in the card. My mom opened up the card and gave him back the money. "Go buy yourself ice cream," my mom said to him. So we come back and his mom and Karen are talking. Karen had the absolute balls to say that my mom was rude for not accepting his money. This absolutely upset my friend's mom because she made her apologize. They show up to my house to do so. Only one problem. I didn't tell my parents about what she said, so they were in for a rude awakening when they found out the hard way. My dad was ticked and my mom was really upset. We go over to my friend's house a month later to celebrate his birthday, and both parties have a talk about that incident. As civil as they, mostly my dad, can possibly make it. Eventually, they moved out of this complex and into another one. We're all still friends and they talk to Karen still. They even come as her guests to use our pool. They want to invite us, but Karen always tells them no, going on her usual tirade. She's still a problem in this place to this day, yelling at everybody she crosses paths with. She can't go one pool day without snapping at somebody, and even my friends' parents tell her to stop as they fear she could get herself knocked out or worse. And in my state, that's a very likely possibility. For everyone accusing me of being racist, I forgot to mention that every time someone gets the upper hand on her during an argument, she screams at them even louder and accuses them of being racist. There were multiple occasions where we witnessed her pulling the race card during an argument, as she believes her nationality makes everything she does okay, but it doesn't. Let me know your bad neighbor story in the comments. HOA story time. It's called Unintended and Unwelcome Consequences, with an update from OP Colorado expat. Picky, noisy neighbors who have the president of the local homeowners association on speed dial are a real nuisance. One day a few years ago, my faithful old Volvo gave up the ghost. The automatic transmission was slowly going out. The final blow was when an oil line to an external oil filter developed a pinhole leak and the engine seized when all the oil escaped. I had the car towed home and it sat in the driveway for a month or so while I tried to decide what to do with it. The options being to replace both the engine and transmission or to sell it off cheap either for parts or to someone who wanted to get it running again. I finally, reluctantly, decided to let it go. I'd miss it as it had been probably the best car that I'd ever had, and I'd done some serious upgrades and improvement to it. About this time, my neighbor called the HOA to complain that I had a junk car in the driveway that I was parting out. To hear her version, the president expected to see something on cinder blocks with no doors, the hood up, and no engine. The truth was that it was still intact, with current license plates and insurance. There was no way to tell from looking at it that it wasn't running. Nevertheless, I was given 1 week to either fix the car or have it gone. The busybody neighbor was known for being extremely conservative. She made teabaggers seem middle of the road. One of the things which she had a particular dislike for was the local NPR radio station, which was associated with the local university. The station was running a fundraiser at the time, so I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I donated the car to the radio station. The appointed Saturday came around, and the car was being picked up by a tow truck when she came out to watch the proceedings with a smug look. She commented to me that it was about time that piece of junk was being removed. When I replied that I donated it to the local NPR station, her smug look was instantly replaced by horror, quickly followed by livid anger. She stalked back into her house and slammed the door. I was happy that even to the last, my trusty Volvo had been useful. This was enough to satisfy me. There's a line between payback and harassment. Also, I didn't think a vendetta would have been justified. Her complaints have since become self-defeating. The HOA pretty much ignores her now. She switched her focus to a couple of young families who moved in. Her take of parents and their friends sitting out on the front porch, watching their kids playing, took the form of alleging gang activity. The HOA found that accusation to be so over the top, they now blow off her complaints. I'm filing a lawsuit, posted by American Water Lily, with more info in the comments. I work part-time at a store known for home decor and kitchen accessories. This is a really good job for me to have while I'm still in college. I've had my fair share of weird experiences with customers, but no one has been outwardly rude or verbally abusive towards me. As a former barista, I really appreciate this aspect. This specific incident occurred last week when I was closing. It was probably around 8 p.m. when I heard a loud crash from where I was up at the registers. My first instinct was to assume that someone was having a heart attack or a seizure, so immediately I run towards the sound of yelling. As a quick side note, our store has an undercover police detective who helps with loss and prevention. He was there that evening and immediately told me to go back to the registers because there was blood everywhere. A few customers told me what was going on, and then I was asked to help clean up the blood. We have proper sanitation equipment to do this without it becoming a hazard. I was still confused as heck until our detective came and told me everything. When I asked him what had happened, he said, "Some lady injured herself on purpose and got blood everywhere. She keeps yelling in the bathroom that she's going to sue the company." I asked him if he was sure she did it on purpose, and he said he saw the whole thing on the security cameras. I was pretty speechless at this point. We've never had this happen at our store. I ended up seeing the lady on her way out, and the craziest thing was that her injury was minor. She also kept claiming that she was a nurse, yet somehow managed to get blood everywhere. What kind of nurse doesn't know how dangerous blood can be? Before she left, she said over and over, "I'm filing a lawsuit. You guys are messed up." We ended up leaving an hour after we were supposed to because of the mess. I can't wait until her lawyer sees the video footage and comes to the same conclusion the rest of us did. Updates. Someone suggested this Karen does not have a lawyer, and OP says, "I know, it was just kind of amusing to hear her whining about it." This is a funny story here. I would love to see her face when she hears about the video, Red Truck 007 says. I worked loss prevention many years ago when slip and pay was big. I had a report of a guy slipping and called the police because he was being way too loud about it. The cop shows up and asks for his ID, looks at it a second, and informs the guy he was the same cop to take his slipping report down the street 2 days ago. He left with the officer. Someone asked OP, "So what actually happened? How did she purposely hurt herself? If the injury was minor, why was there so much blood?" OP says, "The area where she cut herself bleeds a lot, but she didn't hurt herself that badly. She didn't need stitches or an ER visit. She kept waving her hand around and the blood splattered everywhere." So she purposely cut her hand open on a sharp item exposed in your store? Sort of. She dropped the item and it broke, and she intentionally cut her hand from one of the pieces. My store is super careful about anything sharp. Most sharper items are wrapped packaging. They're never just out on the floor for people to hurt themselves on accident. I totally would have said something, but she actually looked like she may have been high on drugs, so I chose not to get involved. She is now banned from the store, though. So true, I hear of people threatening to sue and then getting laughed at by the judge. I'm sure it happens a lot. Try to extort, harass, and ruin me, I'll make sure you're rightfully convicted of disability fraud. Posted by Lord Smaldemort. I lived in an illegal rental in a place that you'd call a landlord's market. There was a housing shortage, and although I had a great job, no credit problems, no background issues, it was impossible to rent somewhere affordable because of my dog. I eventually found a great place, but it came with a nutty landlord. She lived on the property. I'm not a choosing beggar, however, so I take it. For 12 months, I endure the landlord's violation of my rights, taking deposits that she should not have, micromanaging my personal life and my guest, and it's pretty awful. She's always high on painkillers with tiny pin needle pupils, telling me weird crap and trapping me in conversation that I'd rather not hear. Faced with homelessness, I take the trampling of my rights and privacy. She made me miserable. After a year, I had enough. She crossed the line when she had my boyfriend removed by the police when I was at work one day. He had been staying for under 48 hours. I was gone for 2 weeks at home and had arrived back to my rental 48 hours before this. No one was in my rental while I was gone. On top of tossing my boyfriend out, she delivered a bill for his rent and utilities for staying the past 2 weeks that I was gone. No one was in my house. She already bullied me. I guess she thought she could extort me. She created fake court paperwork to intimidate me. The bills I received from her are insane. They are not the writings of a lucid human. She gets all sorts of details wrong and makes personal statements that are inappropriate. The place was empty and I was gone, but she wrote a bill and insisted I pay for his tenancy. This is when crap hit the fan. I finally stand my ground. Extortion is the limit. Everything is falsified. I think it was the Vicodin talking and making her brave. As an aside, that will be super relevant later, her employer had an open fraud case against her. She told me early in my tenancy because she dared them to come after her. Perhaps she should have not dared so hard. After the fake tenancy debacle, crap gets real. I take off work to read up on my rights and to protect my dog and my stuff, and she starts harassing me. Specifically, she did these things over the course of a few days. She called from a blocked number and asked for a stripper and call girl. She called my work as a new landlord seeking a reference and told them I was partying, which is why I wasn't at work, and then came into my yard at 11 at night, stomped up on my porch to scare me, then walked out of the yard, claiming it was a free country when asked what the heck she was doing. She called the Humane Society and told them I had a vicious dog on the loose who attacked her dog. She even called the police and sent them to my job, I work with kids, claiming she found drugs in my house. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out by all of these things. I got a TRO against her, and she couldn't keep trying to ruin my career and get my dog euthanized and attempt to intimidate me. It was good for 3 years. I was happy I won in court. It was a great move for my safety and empowerment. However, when I did move, about 10 days after her extortion, she falsified documents, kept my deposit, and I was forced to go back to court to get my money. Again, I won, and although it took a lot of time and energy, eventually it was garnished from her account. I not only got out of my lease, rightfully, but took my deposit money back against her will. I had a restraining order for 3 years, and she did not know my new address. I was thrilled. The torment she put me through was unbelievable. So, let's cut to the revenge. Remember that fraud case that she boasted about? Well, it came back to bite her. Landlord boldly did construction, high as a kite on Vicodin, while collecting disability because she was wheelchair bound. See the issue here? She played the system to get into paid early retirement, ate pills all day, increased her property value by building up her space, and collected money from illegal rentals. 4 months before I moved out, she was doing construction, and I had a strange feeling I should document her fraud. I knew she could turn on me at any point, and well, I'm sure glad I had the foresight to do so. She had gone to work the first day of her contract and fallen out of a wheelchair on a ramp that was not up to code. Almost 4 weeks later, to the day, she was happily at home, continuing with her activities, building a tool shed from scratch. She was doing construction with no wheelchair, duh. She was bold and figured that she could never get caught. She was doing all sorts of physical activity. I decided to film her and made sure the date was noted. I also took pictures. Some part of me just knew that I should document what I was seeing because she was an awful human who was leeching off the system. She worked in education and she couldn't be fired. Her position was tenured and she was holding her spot while on medical leave for over 4 years. They legally could not hire a new teacher. Substitutes poured in and out of her classroom. Hundreds of children missed out on a legitimate education because she held her spot. She was scum. I worked in a similar field, so I knew what damage she was doing with her actions. Back to the eviction and TRO event. Shortly after moving out, when the restraining order was in effect, I went to her employer and offered evidence in his fraud case. It was a serious state-led fraud case against her. They were going after her. He was elated that I had such strong evidence, and he put me in touch with private investigators. I handed over the evidence after sitting down with them and giving my statement of her activity and of how she was mobile at home. I didn't have to exaggerate and I didn't have to lie. I just told them exactly what happened. Even if she didn't burn me, I felt like I was doing my civic duty by ensuring the kids had a real teacher in their classroom instead of this piece of garbage. Months later, I called the investigators and found out that my evidence was what really sealed the deal. She was convicted of disability fraud. She was fired from her position and was potentially going to pay back years' worth of disability payments. I did that. I am the reason her scam fell apart. She thought she could bully me into extortion. She didn't. She thought she could ruin my career and hurt my dog when I stood up to her. She didn't. In fact, I won. It was what I needed to be empowered after she had crapped on me. It wasn't even revenge as much as standing up for myself. If she did have to pay it back, she'd only have her house to pay with. My dream is that she lost her house, ended up with a renter, and just hopes for a kind landlord. HOA story time. No security light allowed? No problem. Posted by Jaffe Brutus. Years ago, when my wife and I had purchased a home, the builder had told us that it might be part of an HOA, depending on how many homes that they ultimately constructed. We were among the first 5 buyers, so we pretty much had free reign to change what we wanted, via permissions from the builders, that those changes would be added to what was turned over to the HOA, and for as long as we lived there, the changes could stay. The one change that we did add was a motion security light on the back of our fence, because my neighbor's kid would smoke MJ there and I didn't want to smell it sitting on my patio or when I had the windows open on nice evenings. Well, that went up my neighbor's butt sideways for whatever reason, and she refused to believe her kid would be doing that, even though it didn't point towards any other home, just the grass between my fence and the woods. It kept the kids from smoking the MJ there without calling the cops on something so foolish and petty. But since it was cleared from the builder, she couldn't do anything. Well, 6 months later, we end out with an HOA, and she makes it priority 1 to get the lights. Several other neighbors followed what I did, whose homes faced the wooded area, removed. The requirement to get it changed, since they were builder approved, was 80% of the community, so the only votes to keep came from those of us on the back of the property. So we have to remove them being permanent changes. Not even 3 days later, her kid is again back there smoking the MJ. The HOA counter to why I had it was to call the police non-emergency number, but that's absolutely stupid to risk freaking some kid's life up because he wanted to smoke, when that's an issue his parents, who, remember, don't believe he does it, deal with. So now I am pretty livid. This North American land whale cried to the point that I had to remove a cheap and non-disruptive fix. She refused to be a parent and keep her kid from impeding on us, and so now it's time for me to be petty. The next day, after her kid first went back there, I go out and I buy a 12-foot section of 4x4, wire, concrete, a large planter, and 3 6,000 lumen floodlights, and build essentially a mini portable stadium light setup, rigged to the motion sensor, so whenever anyone passed by my fence, instead of being a small area immediately behind my house lit up, the sun came out to the woods with one light giving her home an X-ray. The first time her kid went back there, it was glorious. I got a picture of him with his device in hand before he skirted off so I could show her proof, and it sent her through the roof, getting those free X-rays. I showed her the picture and she still didn't care, saying that if it goes off again, she'll call the police, and I was fine with it because I told her that they'd see the same picture that I'd just shown her. In reality, they wouldn't, but Martha the manatee didn't know that, and I didn't expect her to try and call my bluff, which she never did. Just complained to the HOA a lot. In the morning time, I'd lay the contraption down so it couldn't be seen, and raise it up after it got dark. About a week after this, I get a summons to the HOA meeting that's happening that week, and since it was disciplinary for my contraption, their lawyer was there and they want to hear the case. So I lay everything out, from builder to pictures showing how the original light didn't shine any brighter than the one on our porch, and it couldn't be seen from inside the homes. Her vendetta to change the HOA rules to suit what she wanted, and 3 of the 5 other neighbors who had to remove their security lights were also there to argue for getting them back when I went. After about 40 minutes, the lawyer comes back and pretty much said, "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Jaffe Brutus, you're right. This isn't a permanent structure, so it technically is allowed, but you can't have a light facing her property any longer. In addition, by the 1st of the next month, you will all be allowed to reinstall your smaller lights, as they did provide a measure of security that benefits the property as a whole." So Martha the manatee was blessed with another week of the sun on a pole and being mad about it. Those of us who lived facing the woods got our lights back, and after reselling the lights, I made most of my money back that I spent on supplies making that monstrosity. It was absolutely worth spending the few $100s to out-petty a bad parent and insufferable neighbor. Neighbors' kids are trespassing and throwing rocks at my car, with updates in the comments by Lou Yaya. My new neighbors have lived there for 2 months now. It's 3 single women with 8 children. Kids are always unsupervised. They come to our driveway and play, which I didn't think it was a big deal at first, until my brother almost ran them over once in his work truck. He didn't even notice they were there. I was outside one day and the kids introduced themselves, and they went off, telling me how whenever we aren't home, they come to my house, and I told them they couldn't trespass and to please not come over anymore because they can get hurt. Kids continued to come over. My brother spoke to them, and he kicked them out. We randomly found 8 nails in our driveway and assumed that the kids threw them to our side since they had workers doing some stuff on their side earlier. Fast forward to the end of June, and my brother comes in screaming to come look at my car, and he told me he yelled at the kids because he caught them throwing rocks at my car. They threw over 60 rocks at my car. I couldn't find an adult to speak to at their home either. Finally, a friend came out and said that she is just a friend and that the mothers are not home. I called the police station for them to come talk to the parents and make a report, and they said they can't come because they're kids and they can't make a police report on kids. 2 days later, the kids were outside playing with water and they decided to throw their underwear to our driveway, and it's been there for 4 days now. Yesterday, I came home from work and I heard bangs in my window. I ran to the front of the house and the kids were ready to throw another rock at my window when I told them to stop. I went over to their house and knocked for 10 minutes while their door was open and a newborn baby was just there at the door. When finally, one of the moms came out of their house. It's very small and I grew up there, so I know how the house looks inside, and I know that they were ignoring me. She comes out and doesn't care that her kids are throwing rocks. She doesn't care to supervise her kids. She doesn't care that they damaged my car or anything and doesn't want to take responsibility or tell anything to her kids. She is very dismissive and just shrugs her shoulders. What can I do in this situation? I'm installing cameras over the weekend. It's so frustrating. Update time. Comment says, call child services. If they're being left unsupervised, did you neglect to tell the police that? Then they are in an unsafe home and should be taken away. OP says, I did mention that to the police that they are unsupervised. The adults are inside, but the kids are out for hours by themselves. Hopefully, now that we are installing cameras, we can get proof. I also texted their landlord, but he never replied. So the person that answered at the police station said since they are minors, they can't do a police report, but I can take the parents to court. I told her, well, I don't need a police report to have proof of the incidents. She said no. I asked her if I need a report for my car insurance. She said no. I called my insurance and they said a police report will help. But my insurance wants me to pay my deductible, which I don't want to pay. The kids are 3 to 6 years old, and she said if they were 12 and older, they can do something. So I told the officer that answered, so kids can just damage someone else's property? She said no, that I need to take them to court, but they can't do a police report on kids. This is based in the USA as well, and you gotta call CPS, take them to court. I know it sucks for the kids, but these parents are not giving them the life that they need, and those kids need to be somewhere with love and care. That's what I say as a dad myself. New neighbors, apartment neighbor from heck, with updates, posted by my little art mare. Today, I went outside after my cameras flagged someone opening the gate to our yard and walking on our porch. I headed outside and saw that 2 bags of dirt that I had on the porch were now on the sidewalk in front of my house, and the gate was open. I walked over, picked it up, and then promptly heard, "Hey, that's mine." I've been dealing with hordes of porch pirates that all say similar phrases when caught, so I told her, "No, it's not. I have you on camera grabbing it off of my porch." Now, here's where the story gets interesting. She started getting ticked, yelling something on the phone, and then told me that her dad dropped them off to the wrong house. These bags were sitting there since last Friday, coincidentally the same day my wife and I cleaned out our old car for a trade-in. She did the cleaning and left most of the stuff by the gate for me to grab, including those 2 bags of dirt. I just brought it to the porch yesterday out of laziness. Now I should note I have an extensive garden and buy dirt every other week to supply new plants. These happen to be the exact same bags that I buy. So it was not unusual to think that I forgot a couple of bags in the old car. So I went inside and asked my wife, and she said that she didn't, so this person was actually telling the truth. I brought the bags back out and tried to apologize for the misunderstanding, but was cut off and told to learn how to be nice. I've never seen this person, and after checking my cameras, sure as heck, a random guy tossed them over my gate, and I must have missed the notification, and the timing was just perfect to where it didn't raise an eyebrow. No idea where she lives, but she carried the bags off, so it must be close. Should be fun moving forward. Update time. I don't plan on really attempting to apologize again, more so explain why I acted the way that I did and try to reset their interpretation of me via gift giving, so I don't have to deal with any more nonsense. They aren't the first neighbors to do something similar and then retaliate, hence the reason that I have cameras to begin with. Don't worry, I know what she did was rude as heck. Leaving the gate open honestly really screwed with me because my dog followed me out the second time and could have potentially escaped. I should have closed it, but my mind was elsewhere at the moment. Yeah, I honestly feel bad for being a jerk off from the get-go. In my defense, similar things have happened multiple times with much different results. If I see her again, I'm going to try to explain my train of thought today, but who knows, maybe even offer a free plant cutting to help keep the peace. After talking to my wife and thinking about it, you're right, I wasn't a jerk. I think that last night I felt sympathy in the moment, imagining if I botched a delivery like that and had to recover it. But thinking about it makes me realize that, regardless of her efforts, what she did was unacceptable. Don't worry, we have an extensive camera system. I actually have to shut some down during busy hours because of how many notifications I get. 3 different lots we park in around our house, depending on which ones are full, and I have them all covered. Wanted to update everyone who's interested. It turns out it's the stepdaughter of a neighbor that I talk to regularly who just moved in next door. They came over and apologized for what happened. Yeah, it's a misunderstanding, but they better apologize. She was rude to you, OP, and now at least you can move forward on decent terms, I guess. So several years ago, my friend, we'll call him Boris, and I would always help each other do the spring cleanup for our properties. This included taking out damaged trees, preparing garden plots, and taking care of our weed-infested yards. I was going to be first on the cleanup detail, so I prepared tools and implements the Friday before the big cleanup was to happen. Sharpening tools and chainsaw chains, lawnmower blades, and just getting everything in order. Among those tasks was mixing what we had with 2-cycle oil. Finished up kinda late and generally put things away for the next day. The next morning, Boris shows up with coffee and biscuits around 8 a.m. As we were sitting on his tailgate enjoying breakfast, my neighbors ride by in their beat-to-heck Chevy Cavalier, smoking like a freight train. We'll call them Rocky and Bullwinkle. Boris and I made the usual jokes about the amount of smoke pouring from the exhaust. Dang, bet they go to the gas station and fill up with oil and check the gas. We soon finished breakfast and thought no more about it. As we begin to get the tools laid out and hash out a plan of attack, I can't find my gas cans. No mixed gas, regular gas, or a gas can in general. That's when it dawned on us why the car Rocky and Bullwinkle were driving was smoking so bad. I am ticked, to say the least. Well, all Boris and I could do was go shopping for gas cans, gas, and more 2-cycle oil. After we returned, we saw Rocky and Bullwinkle pass by several times, but all in all, we got a lot done. The next weekend, we dedicated to clean up at Boris's. A weekend or two goes by, and we have a family dinner at my wife's, Rocky and Bullwinkle's grandparents'. Toward the latter part of the evening, we were having a few drinks. Most people had left, and myself and wife's grandfather were shooting the breeze when I had to take a leak. As I was doing so, I saw a gas can with a very distinct paint on it. I inquired from the old man about how it came into his possession, and he stated that Rocky and Bullwinkle left it there. I simply explained that it was mine, as was another, and loaded them in my truck. It ate at me every time that POS car with my neighbors went by. So, I hatched a plan from a rotten egg. I went and bought a few gallons of gas, a few gallons of diesel fuel, and some other various oils. I made a concoction of these different chemicals and filled my new 6-gallon gas can that I had to purchase. With some clean gas, I filled a lawnmower and cut some grass that evening, making sure Rocky and Bullwinkle saw me. Then I put everything away, but forgot and left that rotten egg gas can out. I got up and went to work the next morning and didn't even think to check on the can. But when I got home, I checked and it was gone. My wife informed me that my plan must have worked as she watched Rocky and Bullwinkle go in and out with the car, not only smoking but spitting and sputtering as well. The last time they rode out, they didn't ride back in. They gave me about an hour of peace before they came over and wanted to know if I could look at their car and see what was wrong. If it could not be fixed on the side of the road, maybe tow it home. My response? I've had a long day and I have a migraine. Maybe tomorrow. I saw the panic set in when I told them that. That's when they told me that they had no insurance and it was on a main road. Tough luck. So the highway patrol did run across it and had it towed. It was going to cost them around $500 to get it out of impound, plus they had to have current registration and insurance. The car wasn't worth it. Well, they're those type of people that good luck just falls on them, and the pastor for a local church gave them an old Ford Taurus. Took me a few cans of rotten egg gas, but I got the motor to lock up after about a month. This time, it quit in their grandparents' yard, so they scrapped it, and as luck would have it, they got their income tax returns. They bought a nice-looking Ford F-150, but it began having problems too. Smoked really bad. They did take it to a mechanic that eventually found the problem. He got the truck running right again for about $1,500, and I have never had any more gas cans come up missing. My friend, I'll call her Sandy, worked at a travel agency in British Columbia, Canada. It was a small owner-operated business with the owner and 3 employees, including my friend. Everyone worked Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. One of my friend's co-workers, I'll call her Jane, an older woman in her early to mid-60s, was a long-time nuisance employee. Among other sketchy behavior, Jane was always scamming ways to take time off over and above her official paid vacation time. In order to make up for the lost hours, she would claim overtime hours and pay by supposedly going into the office in her off hours to finish up work without being requested by the owner to do so. Despite being caught in her own lies on a number of occasions and being warned about trying to claim for unsanctioned overtime, the owner of the travel agency was reluctant to officially reprimand Jane or to get rid of her. The reason being is the owner discovered after she had hired Jane that Jane had actually been fired from her previous job at another local travel agency for pulling the same stunts. However, Jane had sued her former employer for unfair dismissal and had won a settlement. After a few years of my friend Sandy working at the travel agency, the owner was ready to retire and offered to sell the business to my friend. Sandy took her up on the deal and took over the business while keeping on Jane and the other employee. Once again, just as the previous owner was afraid to get rid of Jane, so was Sandy for fear of being sued. When Sandy took over the business, she instituted guidelines regarding taking time off and she established an official no overtime policy. Jane would still try with her shenanigans, but was far less successful in getting what she wanted with my friend in charge. However, Jane still had one trick up her sleeve when she wanted to take time off on a whim. Sandy was a divorced single mom of 2 boys who were heavily involved in youth hockey. She would sometimes leave the office for an hour or 2 before closing to get her boys to hockey practice or a game. In order to avoid requesting in person and potentially being denied, Jane would wait for Sandy to be out of the office to book a day off if she didn't feel like coming into work or had made plans. Sandy would then arrive at work the next morning only to discover that Jane wasn't coming in. Despite this happening a number of times, Sandy would usually just let it slide since there was now a definite no overtime policy. Therefore, Jane could no longer claim to come into work on the weekend or after hours in order to try and make up for the day off. She would either miss out on a day's pay, in turn saving Sandy money as the owner, or it would come out of her remaining paid vacation days. Moreover, 2 people in the office at one time could usually handle everything. Jane not coming in was really a no-loss situation for Sandy. There was one time, however, when Sandy was going to be away for 1 or 2 work days just before the weekend to take her boys to a hockey tournament. She told both Jane and the other employee, both verbally and in writing, that they could not book time off for the dates in question, since she would be away and needed both of them in the office. Within a few days of giving this notice, Sandy went into the office on a Saturday to do some paperwork and go through sales for that week. This is when she discovered that, only the day before, Jane had booked a trip for her daughter and son-in-law to Las Vegas, as well as a plane ticket in her name to Calgary, where her daughter lived. Both the trip to Vegas and the ticket to Calgary coincided with the dates that Sandy would be out of the office. Sandy then checked the vacation booking schedule to further discover that Jane had indeed booked the days off that she had expressly been told she couldn't have. Not mentioning she had discovered the travel Jane had booked for herself and her daughter, Sandy emailed Jane telling her that she would have to deny her days off since she'd already been told they were unavailable because she, Sandy, would be away and needed Jane in the office. Through a continued series of email exchanges, Jane replied and outright lied to Sandy with some excuse about her daughter getting some long-awaited medical treatment or surgery, and she needed to go to Calgary to help out for a few days and look after her granddaughter. Sandy replied to this lie by telling Jane that she knew about the trip she had booked to Vegas for her daughter and son-in-law, that Jane's trip to Calgary was most likely to babysit her granddaughter while her daughter was in Vegas, and that she would still have to deny Jane the days off, especially since she booked them after being told they were unavailable. Jane countered in her subsequent reply without even addressing the fact that she had been caught in a lie, that she had been a dedicated employee of the travel agency for several years and couldn't understand why she was being treated so unfairly after all that she had done for the business. She then wrote that since she wasn't being treated as a valued employee, she had no choice but to retire and was giving her 2 weeks' notice. Despite Jane's threat, Sandy replied that she would still be unable to grant her the days off and left it at that without making any mention of Jane's threat to quit or retire. Sandy then contacted her accountant, who also acted as her de facto business advisor, and explained what had happened with Jane. Also aware of Jane's previous shenanigans, Sandy's accountant told her that this was the out that she had been looking for with Jane, and she had it all in writing. He told her that Jane had essentially resigned and retired, and all Sandy needed to do was honor Jane's desire to do so, let her finish out her 2 weeks, or pay her the 2 weeks' wages in lieu with no further severance pay legally required since she hadn't been fired. The following Monday, Sandy went into the office early, accompanied by her long-term boyfriend to act as a witness. She put Jane's belongings from her desk into a box and took the things that were property of the business. Since Jane was old school and had resisted inputting client information in the computer database, this also included a small box filled with index cards which had client phone numbers, addresses, credit card information, and other personal information noted on them. In the meantime, the other employee had arrived for work, and they all waited for Jane to show up. Jane arrived just before 9 o'clock, acting as though nothing had happened, and greeted everyone with a "good morning" as she walked through the door. However, she was apparently taken slightly aback when she noticed Sandy's boyfriend seated in the far corner of the office. At this point, Jane was midway to her desk when Sandy informed her that there was no need to go any further and that she had accepted Jane's notification of retirement. She then handed Jane a check compensating her for the hours she had worked in the current pay period, as well as 2 weeks' wages in lieu of Jane finishing out her final 2 weeks before her retirement. Jane was dumbfounded and went into panic mode. But I didn't retire. I'm not ready to retire. Sandy responded that indeed she had retired, given her notice, and had proof of it in writing. All Jane could do was continue repeating, but I didn't retire, I'm not ready to retire, while unsuccessfully attempting to get the support of the other employee who refused to come to her defense. Sandy then pointed to the box containing Jane's belongings, wished her a happy retirement, and told her to leave the office. Jane quickly rifled through the box and noticed that the small box containing the index cards with the client information was not there. She insisted that Sandy return it to her, which Sandy refused to do, explaining that it was property of the business, contained personal client information, and that she would be in violation of Canadian privacy laws if she were to let Jane take it. Jane's shock had now turned to obstinance, and she refused to leave without the box. Both the other employee and Sandy's boyfriend had started to get involved, repeatedly telling Jane to just leave. Sandy then informed Jane that if she didn't leave, they would have to call the RCMP, which is Canadian police, at which point Sandy's boyfriend dialed 911 to inform the dispatcher of a disgruntled former employee at XYZ Travel Agency who was refusing to leave the premises. Within a few minutes, 2 police officers arrived, and Jane immediately ran to the door, ranting about being fired and about the missing box of client info. In order to de-escalate the situation, one police officer told Jane to come outside and explain to him her side of the story. The other officer remained in the office to hear Sandy's side of the story, agreeing that Jane was not legally entitled to the box of client info. The other officer then re-entered the business and told Jane to wait outside. He said that Jane was insisting that Sandy was holding onto her personal belongings, namely a box of important information. Both Sandy and the officer who had spoken to her explained the contents of the box to the other officer, who in turn agreed it was not Jane's property. The police officers then picked up the larger box of Jane's personal belongings, took it outside to see Jane, and told her that she needed to go home. To rub salt in Jane's wounds, the next day, Sandy put up a large sign in the window of the business, congratulating Jane on her retirement, and even put a small announcement in the local newspaper doing the same thing. The icing on the piece of revenge cake was Sandy, when filling out the necessary government forms for when an employee quits, gets fired, or retires, made sure to check the box labeled "retired" for the reason for Jane no longer being employed. By doing so, Jane was ineligible to collect unemployment insurance benefits. Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.